I want to bring on a guy who I met 8 years ago. He was here for the International UFO Conference going on in Phoenix. You know him. There is no guest or anybody I've ever talked to that creates as much reaction as Jeremy Corbell. Jeremy, it's great to see you.
Great to see you again, John.
This whole subject of UFOs, you have been on the front of it. Tell me how you first got interested in it.
Yeah, I think like everybody else, man, it was just like as I was growing up, you hear about UFOs. It was very different back then. When I was 13 years old in 1989, it was really like a beyond taboo. You got to be kind of crazy to talk about this stuff. But I heard on the radio a guy named Bob Lazar and a guy named George Knapp. George Knapp is a reporter, and he has this guy, Bob Lazar, in silhouette. And he says, look, we have vehicles of unknown origin, flying saucers, and our government is reverse engineering them. And how they fly, it's not traditional propulsion. You don't push something out the back to go forward. They literally warp space and time with a gravitational propulsion system. It was a lot for a 13-year-old to hear, but it really sparked my imagination. I was thinking, well, look, if there are beings out in this vast universe, could they be coming here? And Bob Lazar really described, I didn't know if he was telling the truth, but he described a propulsion system that would allow for that, where distance and time no longer were relevant in the conversation of visitation. So I was like a young kid, and I thought, I really want to learn, is he telling the truth? And that kind of started me on this path of thought. But I didn't know George Knapp. I was not involved in journalism. I was a mixed martial athlete, and I just kind of went on with my life, but always kept an interest. And at some point, it was when I couldn't train martial athletics anymore. I got really ill and I couldn't train it. And I had built all these schools around the world, and I just gave them away. And I decided I'm going to take a camera and ask people questions. And that camera became my passport into all of these questions, into all these worlds that normally I wouldn't be allowed in. I wasn't qualified.
That is
so that's how I started.
That is amazing, because that's the essence of what journalists are really supposed to do. Ask the questions and have an open mind and open heart and see what they've got. And let's hear it out. Let's hash it out. You talked about being kind of blown away with this propulsion idea. The analogy I make when people say, well, even if there's life out there, they can't visit us because there's no way, the distances are too great. And my answer to that is, what if you had told Magellan in 1500, when he was sailing the oceans, hey, this little journey that's taken you 3 years, someday you're going to climb in a metal tube with wings on it like a bird, and you'll be able to do it in hours. Would he have believed it?
Right. And as you're saying that, I kind of get goosebumps, because if I remember correctly, in our first interview, I said something to the effect of, we're just at the point where we're saying, hey, look, there's probably intelligent life out there. But the question we really should be asking is, are they coming here? And I said that maybe in 10 years, we'll be having that conversation. And here we are 8 years later, and I feel like we're on the cusp of that. So to your point, it's like, of course, anything that is outside of our scope of understanding, it seems magical to us. But it doesn't mean that it is. It just means that we haven't gotten to that point of being able to replicate it or duplicate it. So if indeed UFOs are real, and if they are from somewhere else, and if they are somehow getting here from distances that baffle us, then there is just a technological answer to that. That's why I call it the UFO problem. I feel like there's a solution.
Yes, I agree with that, because how do we know that these civilizations, if they're out there, and I think, most people now believe that there's intelligent life out there somewhere. There's life out there, and then intelligent life's a different question. But if they are advanced, let's say they're advanced beyond us by 1 billion years, what could they technically have that we can't even fathom? So I think we have to keep an open mind about this.
Yeah, I mean, it behooves us to keep an open mind about it. Some would say that there is a lot of evidence that there is a technology that is in our skies that is far beyond anything that we have. And our military has admitted that much. Our government to date has admitted that much, that there are craft that do things that seem impossible to us with our basic understanding of physics, and we don't know who flies them. So this basic concept of us catching up, look, mathematicians, physicists, theoretical physicists, people for ages have said, we're a young solar system. We're in a huge, vast ocean of potentiality for life. Of course, life, and even intelligent life, exists out there somewhere. But the question always is there a capability to get here? I don't think anybody argues anymore now that every time we look, we see further out into the cosmos. We see planets that have the same compositions, that have liquid water, that have the potential for life. Why would it be that in such a vast, statistically, it would be impossible that there would be no other type of life forms, but why would we, our hubris, say that we're the top, baby? This is all that's happened. This is how, we're the only ones that develop. As you're saying, there are likely star systems and exoplanets that harbor life that have had longer than we have had to develop technologically, but also it's possible that the technologies or the development on those exoplanets have just taken a divergent path. Maybe they're not burning fossil fuels. Maybe they learned different types of ways to manipulate our physics that just put them on a different trajectory than here on Earth.
Okay, so this is the thing that's gotten my attention. When we met first time 8 years ago, this was kind of a taboo subject. And I know you were skeptical of me because you dealt with journalists before. But again, my posture is I have no idea. And if I pretend I actually know the answer, I'm an idiot. There's so much we don't know that to claim, well, this is nonsense, that is so ridiculous as a journalist to just say, nah, it can't be. So my posture's been, we're going to just explore this and talk about it. But what's interesting and what's changed, and I want to know why you think it's changed. The government is now saying, yeah, there's stuff going on that we can't quite explain. They're opening hearings. They're talking about it openly. Now they've opened 2 portals for the government, for pilots, military, to put videos in, then another one for the public to put their stuff in that they observe. They are now inviting this, and I'm wondering why. And my only suspicion is that they are concerned that we might make contact sometime in maybe the near future, and they want to soften the battlefield so that we don't freak out collectively if that were to happen. Is that possible?
For sure, that's on the table, but let's kind of break down some of what you said, because there's a lot of skepticism of why is the government all of a sudden coming forward and being open about this topic, right? I will tell you from being on the inside, I mean, you saw me there at the last UFO hearing. We fought for every millimeter, every inch to have this out as public dialogue. This is not just the government opening the books on UFOs. That's not what's happening. It might appear that way from the outside. This has been a battle. This has been a battle. People that have come forward who are parts of these programs to what they say reverse engineer these craft, pilots coming forward, and you've seen talking with me and going on record, saying this is what I experienced and providing evidence and proof through leaks that there was something anomalous occurring. Every inch of this has been fought for through public will. The public are the ones asking the questions. The government, as a big entity, is responding to public interest. And we do hope that there will be transparency and truth in those answers that we're trying to get. But people should hold skepticism. Our government has no vested interest in letting the public know the actual reality of what UFOs represent to humanity, other than something like what you just said, which is a terrifying concept, which is that, look, you're going to find out pretty soon. We better get ahead of it. And in fact, there was a letter that was put forward through the Canadian Ministry of Defense. And this letter said, hey, we're seeing all of these leaks. Someone is going to spill the beans that the Five Eyes Foreign Materials Program has been has been reverse engineering these craft of unknown origin, these UFOs. That is an actual physical document that George Knapp and I obtained. it's pretty wild. So you could be right. There might be the sense of, look, this is coming out, come hell or high water, the easy way, the hard way, maybe from the visitors themselves. We should get ahead of this.
That's kind of what I'm wondering, because the government never does anything the easy way. They got to be pushed. And I know
Yes.
you're pushing, but there's a piece of this that makes me, all of a sudden they're very compliant to a certain degree. And you start to go, well, why are they suddenly saying, yeah, let's open the aperture. Let's open the, let's, pilots come forward and tell us what you've seen. Where before they were ostracized. They were ostracized by their higher command. That's where you and George, you're the guy, and when you were 13, who you listened to on a show and heard him, you now work with him, you and George. And
that's right.
They come to you, and you've become the clearinghouse for a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, that's true. So, yeah, George and I have been working together now for actually over a decade. We just, when I was 13, I just got into it, but I had this funny experience. I started calling him for a couple years it took to get through. But yeah, we work together almost every day now. We have our show called Weaponized, and we put, some of this information forward. We have become a clearinghouse. And why is that? It's because people trust us not to twist their words, not to try, we protect our sources, first of all, but we've acted trustworthy of their trust. So that is something that has happened since when Commander David Fravor confided in me about everything that happened with the Tic Tac UFO thing before it was public, before it was all over the New York Times. So this idea that people are coming forward to the government, let's talk about that for a second. Again, from the outside, it appears that they've opened the aperture, as you said. Here's my fear about that. If we go back through government campaigns and programs about UFOs, you can really kind of look at Project Blue Book. Project Blue Book was supposed to be this openness. Look, we know UFOs are an issue. In 1952, UFOs buzzed over the Capitol building. It was a big deal. Every paper wrote about it. Everybody saw them. So our government said, look, with Project Blue Book, we're going to get to the brass tacks on this. We're going to tell the American public you got a need to know and a right to know. But that's not what happened. In retrospect, you look back, and everybody involved with Project Blue Book said it was a whitewash. It was a cover-up. It was to pacify the American public, to convince them that it's crazy to talk about UFOs, and you're silly. You're silly to do it. And serious people don't look at UFOs. That was the mandate of Project Blue Book, was to put it under the rug, say nothing to see here, move on. That ended in 1969. They said, we're not interested in UFOs, move on. Well, we've come to find out that's a lie through historical documents and other programs that have now been acknowledged to study UFOs. So the fear is that it looks like the aperture is opening up within our government. We're getting hearings, we're getting whistleblowers, they've got a reporting site. Are they going to report that to us? Are they going to give us the truth?
Well, okay, let's back up a couple of minutes in this conversation, because you mentioned reverse engineering craft that had been recovered. This came out in this testimony a few months ago. I'm trying to remember the gentleman's name. You know it?
David Grush.
Yes. He is kind of an impeccable source. He's an information guy. He's an intelligence guy. And he says we are in possession of craft. He went beyond that, though. He said we're in possession of alien life forms that were piloting these crafts. Is this for real?
It is, John. And let me tell you how I can tell you that. David Grush came to me and George Knapp first. I was actually filming at the time in a public space, and I caught the moment that David Grush first time broke outside of the intelligence community, first time I ever talked to a journalist. He leans over to George Knapp. I just happened to be having my camera going, so it's an astounding moment. We've come to know David Grush because he didn't come to us to make all of this public. He came to us for protection. He was feeling reprisal, not just feeling it, he was experiencing reprisal. Understand who David Grush is. This is a career intelligence officer, highest clearances that our country has to offer. He was officially tasked by the UAP-TF. So UAP just means UFO, TF means task force. So when this was going on, They told him, they mandated him, go to every compartmentalized Black program, every SAP, Special Access Program, look through and see if we don't have oversight on anything that has to do with extraterrestrial technology or the exploitation and reverse engineering of these technologies. And he did. He went through it all. And guess what? He found that not only are we reverse engineering UFOs, but he called them biologics, non-human intelligence. You can say alien, anything foreign to us is alien to us, but non-human intelligence, biologics, pilots of these craft. It doesn't stop there. He then compiled all of that information, and because all of a sudden they were trying to shut him down, he got real reprisal. He was worried for his safety, his personal well-being. He went to the Inspector General of the intelligence community, kind of like the cops for the intelligence community, and he provided all the witness testimony. Here are 40 people that worked on these programs. These are the program names. This is what our government has been doing in secret, and there's been a cover-up. But the ICIG, the Intelligence Community Inspector General's office, they didn't just take his word for it. They pulled in those 40-plus witnesses. They took down under oath their testimony. They provided evidence and proof of everything we're talking about, and they're doing an investigation right now. That's who David Grush is. David Grush is a whistleblower. And kind of like Bob Lazar, but for different reasons, he came forward because he saw injustice. He was talking truth to power. He said our government's covering it up. And this is not something that should or can be hidden from the American public.
And the government is still insisting, after all this, his testimony before Congress, that there's no evidence that any of this stuff exists, that he's saying it's hearsay, it's stuff he's heard from other people, but they insist it isn't there. What do you say to that?
Not exactly. So let's break that down.
Okay.
So you have what's called ARROW. ARROW is the new kind of UFO program that is forward-facing, that is public, right? People know about that. There are other UFO programs that I can tell you as a journalist that exist right now that are not public. But ARROW is the forward-facing one, kind of like the Project Blue Book of our era. You know, let's get to the bottom of this. The thing is, they have not been able to get the information from David Grush because it's all wrapped up right now in his whistleblower complaint. They did say that some of the things that they have been able to verify from David Grush actually did happen. They're getting closer and closer to understanding that. But David Grush is one person out of many whistleblowers that I've spoken with who will be coming public that have presented their information to ARROW. I don't know how Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, the head of ARROW, could say that we have no credible evidence of any of this being extraterrestrial. Maybe he defines that word very specifically and differently. I think that's why we're calling them non-human intelligence now, just like we're calling UFOs UAP. But you can absolutely see a disconnect between the forward-facing words of our government representatives from ARROW, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, and also what I know that they have been told and what has been proven to them, because people come to me and ask, should I go to ARROW?
Yeah, right. Okay, so somebody watching us chatting right now would say, Jeremy, do you know where this stuff is being kept? Where are these crafts? Where are the biologics? I mean, this is like the keys to the kingdom, if true.
Yeah, well, I can speak on generally where these programs have been sequestered to, because this is public information. I've reported on this before. When sources tell you something, you protect that information until it goes through the right process, right, John? Like
Yes.
that information, specific locations, that's the job for our government to work with these whistleblowers. But what I can tell you is places like Lockheed Martin have received contracts in order to reverse engineer some of these downed or recovered non-human technology craft. So think about Boeing, Raytheon, Lockheed. A lot of these aerospace contractors, you know, they've been given some of the technologies, some of them full craft. Like that is what I understand with Lockheed.
Wow.
So in that situation, you understand that we can't ask them, what do you got through Freedom of Information Act requests, because that is compartmentalized. It's their information. They're not the government. So that's the way this information is hidden. But to answer your question right on the nose, there's multiple locations where these technologies are being reverse engineered. One of the companies that have some of this technology, a craft, is Lockheed Martin.
Oh my God. I mean, this This stuff is wild. Why are they not leaking like a sieve? Some of the engineers in Lockheed Martin saying, hey, the public needs to know this, I'm going to leak it.
Well, there's two reasons. Well, I might argue that it is. You know, people are coming to me and providing George Knapp and I with information. That's how we get information out. But I would also say that with the compartmentalization of these projects, I can tell you something that is 100% accurate, which is that our government takes this UFO issue at a classification level higher than that of weapons of mass destruction. And I can explain to you why they consider this issue higher than weapons of mass destruction. But with that, you get this compartmentalized, what they call stovepiping of information, where not one person knows the totality of what they're working on. But I would argue that people this is leaking. Information is and has been coming out. Just a couple of weeks ago, John, I had the head of the DIA UFO program, a guy named Dr. Lakatsky. He's a rocket scientist. He came on my program and he made an admission that he was allowed to make through a DOPSR process, like an authorized disclosure, because he wrote a book about it. And what he told us is that our government has in its possession, he can confirm at least one UFO, and that we've been able to get on the inside of it, breach the hull of it. That's as far as he would go. But we're talking about the head of the DIA's UFO program called OSAP. That's the title of it. And he straight admitted it. He came on and officially explained that.
So is it possible when you talk about stovepiping that some guy at Northrop Grumman or some other lab gets a piece of a metal that's given to him and say, I want you to look at this and tell me what this is. What is this stuff? He doesn't know what he's really looking at. Is that the kind of stovepiping we're talking about?
100%. I've got on record an individual that I had a recording with where he was working for a subcontractor out in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And back in 1972 or 1975, he was given a superconductor. And they weren't asking him to build another one just like that. They were asking him to reverse engineer it and understand how it worked. And he's looking at this thing. All he's shown is this one item, and he knows that we didn't make it because he's being asked to reverse engineer how it was made, how it powered everything. And he says, look, I know every superconductor company, whatever, if it was 1975, that makes anything like this. And it was so far beyond anything that he had seen. So you get stories like that of people that are shown a little piece and said, hey, can you help us with this? But they don't tell them the program names or the totality of what they're doing or where it came from.
That kind of explains the stovepipe concept. Jeremy, we have a lot of sightings here in the U.S. Are these sightings happening worldwide, or do we just have better technology to detect? Why is the U.S. kind of the center of the universe on this?
Yeah, it feels like the U.S. is the center of the universe on the UFO issue. And to some degree, that can be explained by other countries that have deferred to our knowledge and understanding and allowed us to actually retrieve some of these vehicles from other countries. So it is my understanding that it is a global phenomenon. That is for sure. Sightings, encounters, military encounters. It happens all around the world. It's kind of ubiquitous, right? It's everywhere all the time, all at once. There is an increased frequency that is being seen with these encounters and documentation. That could be because our technology is just better. I mean, you saw that with the shoot down of the Chinese balloon, a little adjustment of the radar, and all of a sudden we have all these other objects that we're shooting at that we didn't see initially, right? So maybe our technology is getting better and our ability to document it. So it's no longer just like a pilot saying, I saw this, and it's not just a radar system backing that up, but now we have these integrated AI radar systems that all share that information. So on one hand, our technology is getting better for sure. On the other hand, it said there's an increased frequency, which goes along the lines with the military perspective. We better get ahead of this. We're seeing this increased frequency. Some people are afraid this is some sort of like prepping the battlefield, is what I've been told. Now, that's just a perspective. I don't buy into that perspective. If UFOs are so advanced, if they wanted to harm us, they would have harmed us a long time ago, overtly. But I think we're seeing both of that, the advancement of technology and the destigmatization, where now pilots can say, this is what I saw, this is what happened to me.
So a lot of people will answer these kinds of questions and say, well, the stuff people are seeing flying in the sky is our black projects. Can you explain that a little bit? Because the first time I ever saw, I guess it's a B-2 bomber, that's the Batwing, right? If that was being tested somewhere, and it was, and people saw it, they would have gone, what the heck is that thing? A flying wing? We'd never seen anything like that before. So you could imagine that people said, that's a UFO. That's something from another world. Is it possible that some of the things we're seeing are our black ops projects?
Totally. And I wish that described every part of the UFO phenomenon, right? That would be so cool if we just had all this awesome technology. I've talked to pilots that flew like the stealth fighters, and they have been misidentified as UFOs many, many times. It's really bizarre seeing some of these strange flight morphologies, right? However, the problem remains that the UFO issue, the sightings, the encounters, because we're not talking just about sightings, John. We're also talking about conversations with pilots of these things.
Yeah, these are military encounters.
What's that?
Military encounters.
Yeah, military encounters. There have been really close proximity military encounters where there have been people that have experienced even some of these pilots. This is something that has been documented and recorded. There have been problems where they have turned on and off nuclear weapons, both in our countries and other countries. We're talking discs, flying saucers. So here's my point. My point is this, that it would be great if all of this was our technology. The evidence just doesn't suggest that. When you see a black project as a military pilot, you're debriefed, you got to go through it. You said, don't talk about this. In fact, it's the opposite. People are coming to them for information, being like, wow, what did you see? Because we don't have anything like this. So it's just been happening for too long. UFOs have been part of the human experience prior to us even having a military or human beings taking flight. So I'm just not sure how that can describe all the sightings.
Okay, of all of the sightings, the one that I guess got my attention the most was the transmedium sightings. This is some kind of craft, and I want you to describe the encounter, that was in the air, went into the ocean, and just vanished without a trace, right?
Gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots.
Right. So there's a number of these, but the one that you're talking about, people should know there's this kind of now very famous video that George Knapp and I obtained and released. It was from the USS Omaha, which was one of our warships in 2019. And the video to your eyes looks black and white, and that's because it's in a thermal signature. It's sensing heat. So you see this object that is shaped like an egg. I mean, it's spherical, and it's moving out over the water, and it appears to go into the water. But it's not me saying that. It's our government. George and I obtained and released internal documents from a briefing, a UFO briefing. And in that document, it clearly says that this object appears to be transmedium. They actually looked for it with a submarine, couldn't find any wreckage, couldn't find the object. But this is not one craft. This is one image of a craft. In 2019, there were over 100 UAP or UFOs that were buzzing 10 of our Navy warships simultaneously. We couldn't find where they launched. We couldn't find where they landed. They had incredible capability for duration. And even the helicopter pilots that were out flying that day in this operational area over 100 miles, they saw them going into the water. So they call that transmedium. What does that mean? Transmedium means that from space to air to sea, you have no inertial effect when you penetrate these three boundaries. So it's like you slip into the water without a splash. It designates some sort of propulsion and technology that we ourselves have not mastered. That's what you see in that video, is an object that appears to be going into the water transmedium. But this isn't new. With UFOs, that transmedium capability has baffled the scientists working on this for decades.
And for the military men and women that you've interviewed who've seen this stuff, does it shake them? Are they intrigued? Are they like, wow, I'd love to fly that? What's the reaction to it?
Yeah, different reactions for different people. If you go back to 2004, when Commander David Fravor saw the now famous Tic Tac UFO and Commander Chad Underwood filmed the Tic Tac UFO, Commander Fravor, Top Gun fighter pilot, closest thing that you'll ever get to our greatest fighter pilots. His attitude was, oh man, I want to fly that. So it just looked amazing.
That's
to him.
the pilot. That's the pilot mentality right there.
But there are other reactions. Sometimes there are negative biological effects to close proximity to UFOs and UAPs. And I really want your audience to know, I'm not just saying that. This is from government reports that are now public, that were done under this UFO program called AWSAP, Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Applications Program. You can look it up. It's called the Defense Intelligence Reference Document.
What kind of negative effects?
Documented these ill effects on the human body when they get to close proximity
what kinds
to these
of
UFOs.
things? What kinds of things are they experiencing?
So there was a large study by the CIA, and a guy named Dr. Gary Nolan at Stanford did this research. He's talked about it. There were problems with the brain. So there was a lot of issues with degradation to the human brain. They suspect that happened like an overt hostility. They expect that just being in close proximity to some of these propulsion fields may have had these negative effects on the human brain. But he studied it. He openly talked about it. He studied it for the CIA, and that's just one of the negative effects. I know for sure another one is a heart issue. This comes from the Rendlesham Forest case, which is an Allied base out in the UK. Very famous case where the people got close. These military individuals actually touched the UFOs, like a triangular UFO that was just hovering above the ground, and had heart damage that was caused by it. And actually the individual that had the heart damage couldn't get benefits to do the surgery and wasn't expected to have a long life. They finally admitted, they went to John McCain, and they finally admitted that he was there on that day of this UFO or UAP encounter, and they gave him full medical benefits, and he had a life-saving surgery that was done. So they're very serious issues where people are experiencing negative biological effects by getting close to these things.
Okay, the other question has been, for the skeptics, I guess, could this be China or Russia technology? We've talked about that a lot before. You say, if that's the case, we've got some problems, obviously, militarily. But you tend to lean toward this stuff is beyond human capability right now.
Well, I tend to lean towards that it is not China and Russia. There's a lot of unknowns here. This is definitely a foreign technology. Just where is it coming from? Who's operating it? Who's had this, all the way back before the 50s, right? So why isn't it Russia or China? First of all, that would be very scary for the United States. If they had this technology, whoever has this technology first, game over, they win, total global domination. These things, it's weaponry, John. It can become weaponry. That's why it's classified higher than weapons of mass destruction, because these propulsion systems themselves can be considered a form of weaponry, the technology itself. But it's not just my thoughts, like it's not China or Russia. This has been stated that when these events happen, they can eliminate that it's ours, China, Russia, or any known technological nation that we are aware of. So I'm sure some UFO sightings, some of them are ours, some are China, some are Russia, but the core ones, the ones that I'm really interested in, the ships that are the size of football fields that pilots have reported, that's not a known actor. That's not a known terrestrial nation.
And then you have NASA, a 33-page report from NASA into unidentified aerial phenomenon. It said most UAPs have mundane explanations. They turn out to be objects such as weather balloons, maybe planes. In a handful of cases, the origins are unclear. Some of them may even be optical problems from what's observing them, that the atmosphere and the optics make it look like something it's not. And they say, so as of now, they have found no conclusive evidence suggesting UAP have extraterrestrial origins. That's from NASA. What do you say to that when the government comes out and says that?
Yeah, I mean, so NASA doesn't represent the whole of government. NASA's NASA. But when they say that, it's obvious and correct. Of course, there's misidentifications of objects in the sky. We call them UFO until they become resolved. But remember, NASA has zero access to classified information. They were not giving any access to these special access programs or these other UFO programs data that our government has acknowledged that they've been running. So it's kind of like we've been doing this. The public has been doing this for a long time without NASA. Thank you for telling us what it is that we already knew. What we're interested in are all the things that we don't know, the bona fide UFO information, a lot of which is classified.
And so NASA might be kind of because it's got kind of this glistening image, it can be a nice cover. It can be a nice cover story. NASA says that, well, that's it. That's the end of it. But they don't know everything, is what you're saying.
No, they got smart people at NASA with goodwill and good intent, but they're not having the source data that they need. They're just not. They don't have any access to anything classified. What do you think our satellites, when we're using our satellites, we have great satellite imagery, apparently, of UAP and UFOs. Like, they don't give that to NASA. NASA does not have access to those classified platforms. They're just not going to have as much information. What you're saying is, well, it's nice, satisfy the public. NASA says nothing to see here. Man, if that's what's going on, that's really tragic to human understanding of what the UFO problem is. I do fear that these public-facing government programs, this interest from the public on UFOs, this great reporting, such as in the New York Times in 2017, that it sparked so much interest, that the mechanisms of government are being created to dissuade interest in this true mystifying topic. I do fear that that's what we're going to see, is a repeat of Project Blue Book. But that's why independent journalists, such as yourself, George Knapp, me, everybody within our networks or our ability, we're going to get to the bottom of this come hell or high water.
Do you think that's coming sooner rather than later? Do you think we're reaching kind of critical mass on this subject?
Well, definitely consensus reality is starting to match up with actual reality when it comes to what the issues are with the observations of UFOs. So I am hopeful because we're seeing media now. You can report on this. People can report on this. Before it wasn't cool, it wasn't okay, it was stigmatized. That destigmatization process, especially in media such as yours, that's so good to have, that's powerful because it alleviates that burden and allows people to come forward and tell you what happened. So I am optimistic in that sense. But I got to tell you, it is a fight to get people to that congressional hearing, to have those whistleblowers put under oath, to sit there and watch it happen. It was surreal because it was such a fight just for that little bit of space to get that to happen. But look, we're not slowing down. It's going to keep going.
Jeremy, we're winding down here. I'm very curious about this because I've wondered about this. We're also sending beacons out to the universe. We're trying to make contact, you know? We're peering deeper. We're sending signals out. It is the existential question, right? Are we prepared for the answer? If we were to get a hit, are we prepared as a global society to handle possibly making contact?
Yeah, you know, we're living in a different world. Things have changed so quickly over the last 100 years. And what have human beings done? We have adapted, we have integrated, we have survived, and we have thrived. I fear nothing in this world but ignorance. And the worst type of ignorance is self-imposed ignorance. It's a lack of curiosity. I have great admiration for the human spirit, for our ingenuity, for our adaptability, and for our ability to thrive in difficult situations. I think it would be expansive for humankind to finally have that first contact experience with another intelligent civilization. You know, obviously there are dangers involved when civilizations collide. We know that from history. But what I see, if I really sit here and look up to the stars and think about what I've been exposed to in all of this that I've been researching and documenting, is that we are beyond ready to take the next step of understanding of what it means to be human and part of a larger worldview, whatever that worldview might be. It might be stranger and bigger and more uncomfortable than just saucers coming from other star systems to come see Earth because we're exciting to watch and some sort of tourism. It might be weirder than that, John. But ultimately, I have great hope in humankind. I am a human myself. I believe in our ability and to adapt. And I think it's coming in one way or the other. We're going to be living in a different understanding of our place in the universe. I do hope so.
Selfishly, as a journalist, I want it to happen while I'm around. Do you think that's likely that we might get an answer?
Inch by inch, life's a cinch. Yard by yard, life is hard. It's like we just have to look at what's right in front of us. I do hope so, John. I mean, imagine George Knapp wants answers. He's been on this beat for so long. You want answers. I want answers. I am optimistic that we are going to learn a lot more tomorrow than we knew today. There's nothing that seems to be slowing down this train of transparency about UFOs. And I have to be optimistic about it. And I'm going to fight for it. I'm going to keep fighting for it. And I'm going to work hard to try to penetrate that that darkness, you know what I mean, and try to see what's in there.
Can you believe where we've come in 8 years since we first met? This is a completely different.
Really.
This is a completely different conversation than we had the first time. Not
My
entirely,
gosh, you're right.
But we know a lot more in 8 years than we knew the first time we met.
At least we have bigger questions now. We have more informed questions. That's what I see. If I look back at that footage 8 years ago, and I was saying the real question, maybe we're asking the wrong questions. The real question is, are they coming here? Well, now we're being told that they, whoever they are. So I don't even know what the next question is. I am surprised how far we've gotten, but all I've got is bigger questions.
Jeremy Corbell, I can't think of a better person to spend an hour or so with.
I appreciate you, John. You've been really great. You've treated this like a news story when others were afraid to. So thank you so much.
It's my pleasure, my friend. I appreciate it. Jeremy Corbell. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks, man.
Good to see you.